everybody, and welcome back to the Accommodation Show. I'm excited today because I am joined by Matt Cameron Smith from Voyages. He is the CEO over there and doing some fantastic work in the accommodation industry. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bart. Good to be here.
Look, it's very rare that I get interviews that I kind of wake up in the morning and think, oh my God, this is going to be fantastic. But this is actually one of them. You are running accommodation in Uluru, which in my heart is one of the most important locations in Australia. I'll tell you a little story. When I was a kid, I got on my first flight when I was 8 years old. My background's Polish. We were heading out to Poland for the first time, and we did a flyover over Uluru in a Qantas plane. It was back in the days where you could still go to the cockpit and then play around with the captain and do all that sort of stuff. So for me as a kid, it just blew my mind. And I never imagined that now I'd be talking to yourself about what you're doing up there. So I'm really excited. Matt, what I'd love you to do is could you please introduce yourself, let everybody know where you're from, and then what you guys are doing at Voyages.
Sure, Bart. So, Matt Cameron Smith, very proud to be the CEO of Voyages Indigenous Tourism Australia. We have two primary footprints. Probably the lesser known is Mossman Gorge Cultural Centre up in beautiful tropical North Queensland. It's a combination of a cafe, an art centre, and more importantly, a cultural component. So it's the entry point to the World Heritage listed UNESCO National Park. And we offer a combination of welcome to country experiences, guided walks, and other cultural experiences. And our best known, without a doubt, would be Uluru, or the township of Uluru. So Voyages runs the entire township. It's not just a resort, it is a town. So we have the airport, we have 16 amazing business partners out there who all reside in Uluru. And we have the 5 hotels plus the caravan and campground. In addition to that, we have the town square, which is anything from an IGA supermarket through to what is 13 retail outlets and 14 F&B outlets. So it's quite a large facility. We have around 1,150 staff when we're at full tilt. Accommodation for up to 1,600 staff. So staff accommodation is a big part of our business as well as the guest experience. But we're very much a purpose-led organisation. We believe in changing lives through cultural tourism, and those lives are the local community that we work very closely with, the lives of our team members, and the lives, importantly, of the guests that come and have an amazing experience in Uluru. So we have about 38% Indigenous employment right now, so it's a very big part of what we do. And about 27% of our leadership are Indigenous. So through both the National Indigenous Training Academy, which is a Voyages initiative. We've had around 617 graduates come through that program, which is incredibly important in terms of closing the gap and ensuring we're changing lives through education, training and employment. We have all those graduates actually come through with a Cert 3 or 4 in hospitality, tourism or retail. And we are looking forward to having around 700 in total, having graduated by January next year. So that's a very important part of what we do.
Wow. So look, it sounds to me that, it's not just about the tourism, right? So you're enriching people's lives. One is obviously through all the experiences, but working with local communities and educating and training and building a better future for the Indigenous community and I guess for all Australians as well. So I guess there's quite a significant impact that you would feel like as you're going into work. It's not just about the money, right?
Well, that's right. We talk about being a purpose-led organisation, and I think that permeates right through our entire team. And it's also about giving the guests an amazing experience when they're with us. We're an experience-based destination by our nature, but we're also a platform for Indigenous enterprise to thrive. So we have several Indigenous businesses, and we support Indigenous businesses through our operation, both through Supply Nation with our procurement initiatives, but also another great example would be our gallery we recently opened, which is the Gallery of Central Australia. And that's really a showcase of Central Australian art, so it's dedicated to art from the APY lands. We work with 19 art centres. It's about ethical art sales, so the artist sets the price. Our guests get to see world-class art and meet the artist understand why, not just what, these amazing artworks are about. And that revenue goes straight to community. So it's an important part of tying what we do back to helping sustain remote communities.
How brilliant! Look, I'm aware that I think that you started working there in 2020. Is that right?
That's right.
That's right. So
During COVID, yeah.
yeah. So so I guess there's a multifaceted some multifaceted questions here. Like how you seem to be quite well educated, and of course you've been there for a couple of years, working in the job that you're doing. But one, how do you even get into that sort of a position to be doing this sort of work? And then what's your learning curve been to get up to speed? Because I imagine that it's quite a fascinating. You need to be kind of vested, and you need to be interested in what you're actually doing. But yeah, so tell me about that sort of. How did you get there, and how's that journey been over the past couple of years?
Sure. I certainly believe tourism is a really important way to help sustain cultures, and I've been very fortunate to have some great roles during my career with Tourism Australia, where I was part of the experiences team, or part of what my responsibility was really around promoting Indigenous tourism and Indigenous experiences. So, took the first Indigenous roadshow to London, I think back in 2003 or four. So I've been working in that space for quite a while. Before joining Voyages, I was working with AET Kings, who have a significant footprint in the territory and nationally. So, one of our most distinctive attributes as a country is the world's oldest living culture. And I guess from my days with Tourism Australia and beforehand, many countries around the world or destinations promote what's different, and I don't think that's enough. I think difference is just a comparison. If you talk about what's distinctive within a destination, then usually it's the culture. And Australia is incredibly lucky to have the world's oldest living culture, a culture that's older than the Great Barrier Reef. So I think it's a really important or tourism plays a very important role in helping not just drive sustainability through managing emissions and outputs, but also helping to sustain cultural tourism.
Yeah, so there's a massive education part for guests that are coming to visit you and that are staying with you. So that's kind of part of the experience. It's not just seeing; it's actually learning about culture. And I know that the Aboriginal Indigenous culture, it just goes so far back. Tell me about the guest experience. Tell me about, I guess, a little bit about who's visiting. And what you're trying to impart. What are you trying to do with these guests for them to have a fantastic time?
Sure, I think it really is about creating a connection and doing it in a way that it is comfortable for the traditional owners, and that's the Anangu people at Uluru. They want to share culture. They are a storytelling culture, and the stories are told through art, through song, and through dance. So connecting visitors, be it international or domestic, to that culture is a really important part of what we do. And helping create income for that community is also a very important part of what we do, both through entry to the national park, but also through the experiences that we offer. Normally we're about half and half international and domestic. Your listeners would be very aware that we had no international for the last 2 years. And it's starting to trickle back now, which is terrific. But what has been great to see is a real a renaissance of domestic tourism and a genuine interest in Indigenous culture. So we've been able to trade, when we have been able to trade, very strongly with domestic. And it's been wonderful to see Australians really becoming curious about the homogenous nature of Indigenous culture. It's not the heterogeneous nature. I beg your pardon. It's not one culture. There's 200 language groups or more. And if you went to any school in the country and asked the kids, no matter what age they were, who could say hello and goodbye in French or Italian or Chinese or Japanese, you'd get a pretty good hit rate. But if you ask them who can say hello or goodbye in any of the Indigenous dialects, you'd probably get a very poor hit rate. And so I think the country has got a real opportunity now, as we reopen again and restart tourism, to have Indigenous tourism at the forefront of that, from both an education point of view, but also to help this amazing culture not just survive but thrive.
Yeah, and so I mean, there were the campaigns that are coming out through COVID of discover your own backyard. Do you think that was kind of the right messaging for you guys?
I think it was the only messaging our industry could rely on. It was a very important time to actually focus the tourism spend back on our own country. And for a period there where we couldn't go anywhere else, it was a great way to, I guess, reconnect to country for everybody, and realise that growing up and doing road trips was actually pretty awesome fun, even if you didn't have a device in your hand at the time. But I think we've seen a real spike in family travel coming through Uluru, which has been wonderful, and the same for North Queensland. So as soon as borders were open domestically, we saw a direct correlation to our business spiking up. So let's hope the borders stay open.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. I'm touching wood right now. We don't want to go through it again. So, I want to talk about a bit of staffing and that how you went through the pandemic and that sort of stuff. But I'd really like to know a bit about where you guys are going for the future and what your best guesses are. In terms of what might happen next, and I'd like to start off just kind of exploring the changing traveller. So you said that you had that mix of 50% international and then 50% domestic. But now that you've got more domestic as well, it's not the same type of traveller that you're getting. Like you said, you've got more families that are coming through. Yep. So then, because you're a sizable business as well, if you know that you've got more families, you've got a lot of moving parts that you need to move around to make sure that it's going to work, because families' needs are going to be completely different to a couple, from an accommodation perspective to a food perspective to an experience perspective. So then you're moving everything, but how much is enough so that is catering to this new demographic, and then do you lean into it? And before we even started, we talked about the certainty of the future. So how has the demographic of traveller changed? And how has it impacted the business?
So I think I'll take the family one first. Certainly it's impacted, I think, many in our industry in terms of the offering, where we've had to adjust and I guess adapt to a different consumer, or a 100% domestic consumer. Because there wouldn't have been many tourism businesses that had 100% domestic historically, certainly not regionally. So it has impacted the food delivery, certainly. We have to look at our menu options, timing of delivery, how we deliver it, where we deliver it, make sure we have the right outlets open at the right time, the staffing pressures, because we had somewhere around 1,100 staff initially before COVID, and 43 direct services a week in terms of aviation, and aviation is very critical to us. We had halved our staff over that period, and that was very difficult. We're rebuilding now, but everybody is, so the war for talent is very real. And as we rebuild, we have to make sure that we calibrate our delivery in a way that the guest is never impacted, and that we keep the guest experience at the forefront. And that's really our focus right now, is maintaining that amazing experience for the guest and adapting our operational platform to work with what we have. We've been able to secure labour from the Pacific Islands and from the Philippines and other areas where we're looking at skilled migration, but the war for talent is global now, so everyone's in there fighting for the same people.
Yeah, look, the challenges for staffing are really very real for everyone. And I know that you guys do good training programs, and that you're really supportive of your staff and trying to educate them and develop them. One of the questions I got from my community were like, what kind of things are you doing? What kind of impact is it having on the business to maybe attract people or retain people? And are you doing anything that you think might be that other people aren't doing to try to get more staff without giving it all away?
Yeah, I think that the first important point to note is what environment are we recruiting into? And a place like Ilara offers anyone in our industry a very unique experience in terms of honing your skills, being able to save a bit, being able to immerse yourself in culture, and being part of an iconic tourism offering. However, it's a place where everyone lives and works together. So you don't commute to work, you live with your colleagues in staff housing. We have a range of studio 1, 2 and 3 bedroom houses, all of which are self-contained, so you can still cook for yourself. And we have an amazing recreational club, anything from basketball, an incredible gymnasium, lap pool, classes, boxing, the whole bit. So we look after their health as well as their accommodation. There's a staff bar, so you can relax in privacy, which is very important. But then also there's things like settling allowances. So we own and operate the IGA supermarket up at Uluru. So it could be a settling allowance for groceries for a period just to offset your moving costs. A welcome pack in terms of the basics. The longer you stay, the less rent you pay. So there's a 10-year based rent rebate. There's also, depending on your role and where you're coming from and your situation, there could be flights home twice a year, or there's a range of incentives in place. And I think what's important to note when you're looking at incentives to attract and retain staff is that not the same thing will motivate everybody. So it's important to have a conversation with whoever's joining the business and work out what matters to them, and then work out within your suite of what you've got what you can offer them in terms of attracting them and retaining them within the business.
So you're saying that ultimately you guys have to be far more flexible than you ever were in the past in terms of what the offering is going to be, depending on people's circumstances. I mean, like even if you think of, I mean, for you, it's not appropriate the working from home setup, but it's that sort of expectation of the market moving and saying, hey, what about me? What can you offer me, which is going to cater to my needs?
Yeah, I think working from home is one thing if you're working in the CBD, but working in a place like Yulara and even Mossman Gorge to a degree, it's learning when you're working. You're getting a constant education because of the diversity of what we offer. So in terms of honing your skills, some of the country's most prominent hoteliers have had time at Yulara because of its complexity and because of its diversity. So it's quite an exciting place to work in that regard if you're into hospitality, retail, and even horticulture or cultural tourism. So if you commit to that, then we certainly commit to our team, and we want to keep everybody forever, but it doesn't always work that way. However, we have had, we mentioned our training program earlier, our Indigenous training program. We have 4 former graduates that will celebrate 10 years with the business this year. So it is a place where you can progress. It's a place where you can advance your career. And it's certainly an important part of anyone's CV in terms of their ongoing success.
Well, you're building your life around it, right?
Well, it is your life when you're there. We've got a school, a kindergarten, anything from medical centre to emergency services. So it really is like working in a tourism town that's one piece.
So during the pandemic, where obviously it's all about repositioning the business, saving on costs, a lot of unknowns, so therefore you need to remove as much expense as possible. And then at that stage, whilst you're in the middle of it, you're not really thinking about recruiting and what people are going to want and what the new offering is going to be and what the training program is going to be and who's going to be coming, where they're going to be coming from. Like you said, you've got the skilled workers visas or skilled migrants that are going to be coming over, and they might be coming from countries that you've never worked with in the past. That investment of changing the sort of the onboarding or the recruitment is, when do you guys have a conscious change of strategy and say, hey, we really need to look at this particular thing? Of course, you've got HR departments where they're working with you, but go, now's the time we really need to get super serious about how we do things, and where kind of tear up the playbook and go again. How did you approach that, and when did it start?
There's probably a few ways to answer that. First and foremost, during the pandemic, that's when you've got to look after your people. It's not enough to say that you looked after them when times are good and they owe you when times are tough. You've got to back them as well. So all of our attention was to make sure that we looked after our people and understood what their needs were. We worked very closely with local community around vaccine programs to make sure that we did our part, that our protocols were above minimum standard, that we engaged with government on a regular basis, hourly, some days, certainly daily, in terms of keeping ahead of what the requirements were and what the border protocols were. So we had a real duty of care to protect everybody who lives and works in Yulara during both a shutdown period and a reopening period, and I guess a reboot period, which we're still going through now. But in terms of then what happens from there and who do you attract, I think how you look after your people is how you attract new ones. It's your own team will be your biggest advocates in terms of how we get new talent into the business. And for us, it was focusing less on the challenge or the problem around staffing levels. It was about what's the opportunity for us, what is available to us. And so we went to work pretty quickly talking to the government, talking to employment agencies, and trying to work out what was the best pathway forward for us to get staff as fast as possible. And that's really when the Pacific Island Labour Scheme came up, in terms of hospitality trained people in Fiji in the South Pacific who may have worked in cruise before or resorts and were displaced because there was no JobKeeper in some other countries. And the same with the Philippines. We've had amazing chefs join us that have global experience and have immersed themselves in what is a very important cultural melting pot. I mentioned earlier, 38% of our team are Indigenous, but the other 62%, even before COVID, was made up of 41 nationalities. So it's always been a very multicultural place to live and work, and that's beautiful. That lifts skills, it brings shared skills in, we learn from each other, and we're able to immerse other cultures into the culture of the Anangu people, and that's an amazing experience.
Yeah, wow. That kind of philosophically, that actually aligns with the accommodation show as well. My belief has always been to share, to collaborate, and that borders are incredibly irrelevant in terms of the things that we can learn from each other and improve our skill set. So, I mean, right now you might be thinking that it's only going to be Aussies listening, but it's everyone around the world that will be taking these lessons and sharing it through their business. So I really respect that. I'm very well traveled, and I appreciate all those cultures and those experiences that you get, and knowing that people see things in a different way than what I do, which is the most valuable. I wanted to go back. So, cool. Was there anything else on the staffing sort of front before we move on from there that you feel that we haven't covered, which might be of value to the listeners?
I think it's just a matter of we have to look after them. They're our front line. They are our brand. We want everyone to be on brand at all times and be conscious of what it is we do. So we have a fairly lengthy induction program around, through the eyes of the Anangu, so you know whose land that you're on, and to be culturally competent when you're on those lands and working and living in that sort of environment. But the same goes for our team in our Sydney office and for Mossman Gorge. It really is about one team and working to support each other. And we're not believers in whose job it is. It's everyone's job to get things done. So regardless of your discipline within the business, it really is about what are the priorities. Let's all muck in together to help each other. And then you get on with what your particular discipline is.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I wanted to go back to the part where we were talking about the changing guests and the changing traveller and what their needs are. With a business of your size and being in the position where you sit, how are you getting data back to let you know what's going on and who's staying and what the changes are and what those needs of those consumers are? Is it all coming through surveys? Is it coming through check-in information? How are you keeping? Because everything you do now, you need sort of minute by minute information coming at you, right? Like otherwise you're way too slow. Have you had to make any changes, and how are you getting the information that you need to make the next decisions?
Well, it's ongoing. I think guest touch points is something that you map constantly in the business, and whether we're capturing data through the website, through booking forms, through trade partners, through guest registration, certainly one way, although we want to digitise that and make it paperless. So we're working to make that as streamlined as possible pre-arrival. But certainly guest surveys. So, we want to know what the guest thinks after the experience as well as before the experience, and is there a gap between expectation and delivery? And so our team scrutinise our guest feedback daily in terms of how we're tracking. And what's important is, it'd be a waste of time to ask the question, get the data, and not doing about it. So it's also how you respond to what your guests are saying around value, delivery, timing, venues, food experiences, the calibre of the rooms and the delivery of the room experience. So it's all touch points.
And has there been any change in people's expectations that is sort of incredibly noticeable in terms of where you had that split of 50-50 and now it's, there's more sort of local travellers coming your way?
I think early on, for us all, how we deliver buffet experiences during a pandemic, how we can adapt our services. And we did a lot of work on that. Guest signage around distancing, appropriate behaviours. We've had times when, on and off, we've had to deploy a mask mandate based on what the government's telling us to do. So territory, different rules to other parts of Australia. So, we really do follow what the government was talking about during the pandemic, but also ensuring the least impact on our guest experience and to protect our own team. So, probably early and midpoint pandemic, distancing was really important, how we set restaurants, how we delivered bar experiences. Buffets were important. Some venues couldn't trade because of the way they were set up physically, so we had to adapt a little bit. Outdoor dining became more important because people felt more comfortable dining outside, so sounds of silence, that kind of experience were important, so it was important. So I think that will be ongoing. It'll be very interesting to watch the changing expectations of the inbound markets and where they're coming from and whether that's different by market by market. US, they're still wearing a mask, you still have to test to go back to the US. UK and Europe's very different. Japan's still relatively closed, as is China, so it'll be an ongoing challenge for the industry as to how we deliver. And if you look back in history, there's some lessons that we've learned. 20 plus years ago, we're still carrying 100 mils of liquid in flight for international flights and taking our shoes off, and 9/11 was 21 years ago. So some things change travel forever, and our industry will have to adapt.
Yeah, and so that inbound market stuff, and I think this is a nice way to sort of come towards the end of the episode, is looking ahead, thinking about risks, thinking about the future, thinking about the travelers that are coming. And you're absolutely right. Where people come from is more relevant than ever before, especially in terms of their vaccination requirements, in terms of their expectations. Right? I was over in New Zealand last week, and everyone's still wearing a mask. And then I get off the plane in Melbourne and just chuck it in the bin. So you're going to have these different expectations from different people as they come to visit you. And one thing that's obvious is that there's a bit of apathy as well within, people like, we just don't know what to do anymore. The rules change all the time. For you guys, particularly every state, it's got different rules and different regulations and mandates. Have you got a team that's watching this? What would you recommend people do to manage this in terms of understanding the people that are coming at you? Do you need a dedicated squad to look after this?
So, we have a guest wellbeing team that focuses very closely on that, and they work across the business units. We also work very closely with NT Health in terms of what are the current protocols. I think we're on version 48 now over the last 20 months, so it's changed a lot. So you have to be very adaptive. That said, the governments are now talking very much around self-accountability and making sure that you are accountable for yourself. So if you're not feeling well, we have a range of protocols. We have pre-guest arrival comms, we have post-guest arrival comms that talk about what to do if. So everyone's on the same page, and our business partners are also a big part of that, as are our team members. So we want to make sure that we're protecting everybody. So if ever we get any inclination something's going wrong, we go out with a mask mandate for our own people before the guests, just to make sure we're doing more than what is the basic minimum to protect everybody. And that will change. It'll change over time. I don't think that sanitising and cleaning will change, and that's a good thing. It's made travel arguably probably more hygienic than ever because we're more conscious of it. We're washing our hands more, we're washing hard surfaces more, we're disinfecting areas more. So those heightened protocols will probably stay with us for quite a while. And that's great because it means not just COVID, but other influenza and other things that you can catch as you're travelling could be reduced. And that's a good thing.
So final few questions. So around the future, kind of looking at the domestic market, we've seen that demand has been incredibly strong. We know that there's it's almost like quite an affluent traveler that's coming to us, and they're spending more money. What are your sort of projections as a business that you're allowed to disclose in terms of how long that will last for?
I think domestic has got a lot more legs in it yet. It will depend on a couple of things around aviation and capacity to fly in and out of the country. It'll depend on as countries reopen. But I do think that when it comes to family travel particularly, it'll remain very strong. There'll certainly be a component of VFR that will drive traffic both sides, inbound and outbound. It's not so much what we've missed, it's who we've missed. That will be the early part of travel to drive it. And that will help for inbound. We want to position Uluru as an amazing place to reconnect with loved ones. So don't just come to Australia to see your loved ones, come to Uluru and share the country with loved ones.
Yeah.
So I think that there's ways our industry can really capitalise on those trends as they evolve. Inbound will come back, it will.
Yeah.
When? That's really crystal balling. We haven't planned for much more than 30% even into 23. I think it'll grow beyond that, but it's important that we are conservative in our forecasts and manage the business appropriately as markets come back. But certainly we've seen no slowdown in domestic, even with international borders open, and that's been fantastic.
Yeah. And then, so that kind of leads me to the final question. Actually, as you said, forecasting and sort of building your models for the future and what you think might happen. What kind of risks are you guys taking into account? What are the sort of the biggest concerns that you can kind of see coming up that could impact your business, but I guess the industry as a whole?
I think there's always been risk in business. Some risk you manage, some you mitigate, and some you accept. And our risk is all about making sure that we are conservative, that we cut our cloth appropriately to how we're trading, that we look for every revenue opportunity, that we work on dollar capture strategies in terms of ensuring that we give guests every opportunity to have an amazing experience with us. And I think the closer you are to what your guests' expectations are and what they're looking to do, the more chance you've got to build yielding opportunities and revenue opportunities. So we work very closely with partners. We've got incredible partners with both Jetstar and Qantas and the Qantas Group, which is fantastic, but also our business partners out in Uluru, whether you want to jump out of an aeroplane over Uluru, ride a Harley around it, get on a bicycle, be on a camel, take an amazing tour with AET Kings. There's a range of options for you. So we need all ships to rise and everyone to be successful, and that's when we know we're getting somewhere as a business.
So one thing that struck me there is you said conservative, and I think that my understanding of the advantage of being conservative is that you're protecting your business, you're protecting your people for the future, because it's like a share portfolio or whatever. You're making sure that it's there for the long run, especially if you're in retirement years, right? Like that's how you would structure it. There are different businesses that would want to take more risk, right? So would want the airlines to take more risks and go faster so they can bring us more customers and that sort of thing. Do you agree with kind of what I'm saying? Have I summarized it correctly?
Yeah, I think you'd be financially conservative, but you'd be commercially brave. So I think it would be dangerous to confuse conservative with complacent. It's over COVID we've completely refurbished Sails in the Desert. We've refreshed Desert Gardens. We've opened the Gallery of Central Australia. So there's been a lot of things that we've done that are new and that have cost money over COVID, and that's really investing in the guest experience. Being conservative is about your planning. It's not about your activity necessarily. So we'll remain at the forefront. We'll be in market as soon as we can. We're in the US only 2 weeks ago as part of a roadshow. So we'll stay at the front to make sure the message is out there that Australia's open, that the industry is arguably better than ever because we've had to focus on what we're good at and get rid of what we're not good at. So I think what you'll see in Australia is actually a heightened guest experience across the board in our industry because we've had to really hone our delivery. And that's fantastic. I think that'll bode well for us internationally as well as domestic.
Yeah, wow. I'm inspired. I really am. I think I love the journey that you've been on, Matt. I love that you're doing what you do. I love your enthusiasm. And I can tell that it's all about, yes, you're there, but it's all about your people. It permeates through you, that's what you're all about as an organization. And what you're doing is important work for Australia as a whole. So well done. And look, I want to say thank you for coming onto the show and spending your valuable time with us and sharing with everybody as to what's going on and what you guys are doing. Of course, I'd be remiss to not encourage everyone to visit you, to come up, take a trip.
You're welcome.
Is there any final thoughts or any final words you'd like to impart on our audience, or any ways that people should reach out or engage with the business?
I think probably a couple of things. Cultural tourism matters. We have an incredible asset in our Indigenous culture, so I'd encourage everyone to learn more, understand more. Listening is incredibly important when we're dealing with First Nations people. So it's their land and their culture, and it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's exciting, it's diverse. So get amongst it. The second one is if you're looking for an amazing experience working in hospitality, give us a call.
Okay, love it. Okay, great. So everybody, thank you so much for listening to the episode. Make sure that you give us a like, give us a subscribe, leave us a comment below if you've got any questions, and myself or Matt or his team will jump onto them and help you out. Once again, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I do appreciate it, and I wish you a really good rest of the day.
Thanks, Bart. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.